Hi, this is Frank Strochel with another episode of Stories Best Told in the Dark. First, a couple of uh, quick comments. My last episode dealt with the subject of hypnosis and lucid dreams, and apparently that stirred up a little bit of interest. So I think in the not too distant future, I may dig into my dream journal and see if I can find a few other very interesting dreams to talk about. Also, there's an interest in what was the process I used uh, by which to have lucid dreams, because it was a nightly thing for me when I got good at it, and there is a process you can follow. So I may want to say a little bit about that as well. Secondly, my book, Stories Best Told in the Dark, my second book will be out around this time next year. It's called Stories Best Told in the Dark 2, and the subtitle is Stories for a Sleepless Night, and it's going to be stories from other people that I have verified as much as possible to be authentic. And that should be pretty interesting. I've got some interesting stories already. So, having said that, today I want to talk about a chapter in my book that deals with some incidents that happened to a couple of friends of mine, but my wife and I were involved in it, and that's how it made its way into this book. I had a couple of friends, Chris and Cynthia, who I originally met Chris at work. He was my supervisor at work for a period of time. And when we realized how much we had in common with regards to paranormal and the occult and that, we started actually hanging around outside of work. And then our wives became good friends, and they lived in Warwick, Rhode Island. And I want to tell you three short stories from them. All three are amazing, and there really is no explanation other than one of a paranormal nature. So let me get started. I'm going to try to keep this to a half hour or less. The first story I called Along Came a Spider. When Cynthia's father died, 3 days after he passed away, she was in the bathroom at home in Warwick, and a spider crawled out of the sink. Now, this was not a normal spider. This spider was big. It was probably the size of a quarter, between a quarter and a $50. It was a big spider. It was all black, and it crawled up out of the sink. And of course, Cynthia, who had arachnophobia, screamed and panicked, and her husband come running in, and they flushed the spider down the sink, put the stopper down, and Chris told her, well, that spider's dead now. It's down the sink, it's drowned, whatever. It's gone. And neither one of them had ever seen anything like that. It was just so big, and it was just weird that it came up out of the sink like that. They go in the living room and they sit down and they're watching TV, or the telly as they call it. They're both from England. And Cynthia's still kind of upset about this because she's petrified of spiders, and this one was no small spider. It was good size. They're sitting on the couch watching TV, and they hear someone knocking on the window. They turn around, and that same spider is outside the window knocking on the glass. Now, of course, spiders don't typically knock on windows, and how would it have gotten from the sink in the bathroom with the stopper down to outside the house at the window? So Chris gets up and goes running out there. By the time he gets out there, it's gone. The spider would appear and then it would just vanish. I mean, you take your eyes off it, you go back, it's gone. Kind of hard to understand. And the first thing that, occurs to anyone who's in that paranormal space is perhaps this is not a spider at all. In any event, they go back to watching TV, and all of a sudden, the spider goes running right across the living room floor back towards the bathroom again. He jumps up, and of course, Cynthia's screaming. She's out of her mind because this is something that really frightens her. He goes in the bathroom, and there's no spider. There's nothing to be found. So he thinks maybe this is what they call a tulpoid manifestation. A tulpa, or a tulpoid manifestation, for those of you who don't know what that is it's a construct made out of something called ectoplasm, and hence why things would disappear so quickly, because ectoplasm is very unstable and it dissipates quickly. And many spirit entities, whether they're carnate or discarnate, can create things, whether it be a cat, a small animal, even the image of a person, out of this ectoplasm, and then it will dissipate and vanish as quickly as it came. So he's thinking to himself, maybe this is some kind of tulpoid manifestation, because the house they were living in Warwick at that time did have some strange things going on in that house ever since they moved in. Well, it occurred to Chris to ask Cynthia about the spider. He said, didn't you tell me that your dad used to scare you with spiders when you was a little girl all the time? And she says, oh yeah, my father used to get such a kick out of that. He used to go to these little stores, 5 and 10 cent stores, whatever, buy these rubber spiders and things, and sneak up on his daughter and drop it on her shoulder and say, what's that on your shoulder? And she'd look and she'd freak out. Probably why she ended up with arachnophobia, but he thought it was funny. So he was always doing things with spiders. And Chris said, you don't think it's your father doing this, trying to let you know that he's okay? And she thought about it. She says, you know what? It would be just like him to do that. Now, was it? We don't know. But once that acknowledgement was made, and she acknowledged that, this pretty much could be my dad doing this, that spider never made an appearance again. So, was it a tulpoid manifestation? Was it something her father was sending her a signal? The only way he knew how to let her know that he was okay, even though he had passed on, he still existed, he was okay, and not to worry about him? I don't know. But that was the first story Chris and Cynthia told my wife Linda and I. I found it very, very interesting, and we would spend a lot of time with them, and we would talk about experiences we had. So the second one he told me had to do with their father again. They're home one weekend. It's on a Sunday afternoon. And Chris gets this feeling or desire to go up into the attic of the house and just kind of look through the old stuff that was up there. No particular reason why, just seemed like something he wanted to do. So he went up there and he found this old box. He opened it up, and inside the box was a Brownie camera. I think it was a Brownie camera. I'm trying to remember what it looked like, but it had 35 millimeter film in it. And he picked up the camera. He says, oh, geez, I remember this, And then he realized when he looked at the window that there was film actually still in the camera that had not been taken out and developed. So he thought, well, this camera's been up here for years. The film's probably no good now anyway. But what the heck? I'll take the roll of film out and I'll bring it and have it developed, and I have no idea what's on this film. So he did that. When he got the film home, him and Cynthia were looking through it, and they were family pictures, and as they're looking at them, they're remembering, oh, I remember this, I remember that. And then they came to a series of pictures that had to do with her father's funeral. And one of the pictures was taken at the foot of the grave. You see the casket with flowers all over it, and the family all around the casket, and the gravestone in front. And right on top of the gravestone is her father with his arms folded on the grave, smiling and winking as his picture's taken. Now keep in mind, he's dead. He's the guy in the casket. And yet he came out in the picture, clear as day. So Chris takes the camera and the film back to the developer, shows him the picture, explains that this guy in this picture is dead when this picture was taken. He's in the casket. How could this happen? And the first thing the guy said, well, it's probably a double exposure. But not realizing that Chris, who used to be my supervisor, and I worked for Polaroid Corporation, and we were pretty much camera experts. And we told him if it was a double exposure, the whole frame would have been double exposed, not just one little section above the gravestone with the father's image perfectly cut out and pasted in there. And this is before digital. So there's no computer graphics imaging. There's none of this. This was back when, in 1960 something. So this is before the first personal computer come out or anything. There was no digital. There was nothing. So the guy says, I really don't know what to tell you, Chris. I've never seen anything like this in my life. And the conclusion we came to was that this was yet another instance of her father telling her he's fine. Unfortunately, they never developed the film until many, many years later. But had they developed it the week they took it, she would have known immediately that her dad was okay. So since that didn't happen, we're assuming her father went the spider approach next to get her attention. It's interesting that those that don't believe in the afterlife certainly can't explain these things, and they just choose to believe they didn't happen. But when I've seen the evidence, I've held the picture in my hand, I know these people, I know this happened. But that's not even close to what happens next. They decide it's time to sell their house, and they decided to move to an island. It's called Peaks Island. It's off the coast of Maine. And they go out to the island. So my wife Linda and I visit them quite frequently. We drive up to Portland, Maine. We take the ferry over to the island, spend the day with them, come home at night. Quite a few times we would sleep overnight and come home the next day. He was kind of a jack of all trades on the island. He would dig graves. He would do whatever he had to do. He was retired, but he was a workaholic like me. He liked to work and keep busy, so he helped his neighbors out, whatever. Well, his wife Cynthia, her sister lived in England, and she had a daughter, Katie, that was very close to Cynthia. It was her favorite niece, and they talked on the phone all the time and everything. Well, she gets a call one day from her sister that Katie was diagnosed with terminal cancer at 19 years old. Obviously, everybody was devastated, and this 19-year-old was petrified of dying. Heck, she hadn't even lived yet, and she was just so frightened. The only person she could think of that she could talk to about it was Chris. Chris was the kind of guy that he had so much wisdom. He was such an old soul. He could fire you, and you would thank him on the way out and take him to lunch. That's how he could talk to people. He could reason with people. He could let people see what's really going on. So she decided to fly to the U.S. and spend a week with Chris on the island so that she could talk to Chris about how to prepare herself to die and not to be so frightened. And Chris, having a lot of experience, having lived in many haunted places, having experienced all kinds of phenomenon, set about talking to her about life and death and what the afterlife was like, and that it was nothing to be afraid of. She was not an evil person. There wasn't a lot of karma she had to account for at 19 years old. He went through everything with her, and they spent every waking moment together for a week. And at the end of the week, she was actually so much better. She was so happy, and she thanked Chris, and she kissed him and hugged him. And she says, I don't know if I'll ever see you again in this life. She said, but if I can come back in the next, I will. And Chris said, please do. He says, if you can let me know from the other side you're okay, I'm okay with that. Just do it. So she went back to England, and it was a period of time later, maybe a couple weeks, maybe a month later, she gets a call from her sister in England saying, Cynthia, I think you need to get over here. Katie's kind of there. She's lucky if she's got a couple days left. If you want to see your niece before she passes, you need to get over there. So Cynthia talks to Chris, and Chris decides, look, this is you should go. I'll stay here. You need to spend some one-on-one time with your sister and your niece before she goes. So she went to England, and Chris stayed at Peaks Island. Here's where it gets a little bit almost unbelievable, I guess. So one night at about 1:30 in the morning, Chris hears a loud bang downstairs. Now, this is a two-story house. No one on the island locks their doors. Everybody knows everybody, everybody's neighbors. And many times Chris had found someone sleeping on his couch when he come down in the morning who wandered into the wrong house drunk and woke up and realized they weren't home. They were at his house, but it was no big. They laugh it off, have breakfast, and go back to the daily routine. But something about the noise he heard downstairs sounded like someone was breaking in. So Chris gets up, he looks at the clock, it's 1:32 a.m., and I'll tell you why that time's significant in a minute. He gets up, he walks over to his dresser, opens the top drawer, takes out his .38 snub-nosed revolver, puts it in his pocket, and he starts walking downstairs to check out, see who's down there. So as he's going along, he's turning on the lights, and he's going around checking all the windows, checking all the doors, and, one of the doors to the house was open, like the wind had blown it open. He shuts it, he locks it. He calls out, nobody answers. He walks the entire house from stem to stern. There is nobody there. He said, okay, whoever it was must have heard me coming down the stairs and left. That's great. So as he's going through the house, he's shutting the lights off, and he heads back upstairs. He takes his gun out. He sets it down on top of the bureau, and he shuts the light out, crawls into bed. And when he gets into bed, he feels something next to him. He turns and looks, and it's Katie, the girl from England. She's laying in bed next to him. She looks at him. She says, "Hi, Chris. You told me it would be okay if I came to visit you." She said, "I just died, and I wanted to say thank you for everything you did for me. Is it okay if I stay here for a little while?" Now, if you knew Chris, he's not the kind of guy to ever get nervous. He wasn't afraid of ghosts or anything like that, but he was petrified. And all he could think of is, I'm dreaming. This whole thing is a dream. It's got to be a dream, right? Because he could feel her. She was flesh and blood. She was warm. Her body was warm. She put her arm around him in bed, and she kissed him on the cheek, and she fell asleep holding him. Now he's laying there awake and she's next to him sleeping, physically sleeping. Time goes by. Eventually he must have dozed off. He wakes up in the morning. She's obviously not there. He says, "Wow, what a dream. I cannot believe what I dreamt last night." He gets up and he looks at the clock and it still says 1:32 a.m. For some reason the clock just died at 1:32 a.m. He looks over at the bureau and there's his .38 revolver on top of the bureau, which is always in the box inside the drawer, which means he didn't dream he got up and took the gun out. He actually got up and took the gun out. So now he's thinking, what's going on here? And the phone rings. He answers the phone, and it's Cynthia from England. She says, "Chris, I just wanted to let you know our little Katie died last night at 1:32 a.m. And Chris just said, "Cynthia, you are not going to believe the story I got for you when you get home." Now, he told my wife Linda and I this when we were visiting them, and Cynthia was there. And I'm telling you, man, I still get the goosebumps to this day when I hear this, because I've heard many other cases similar to this. The guy who used to have the lollipop on TV there, I forget what his name was, but he had a similar experience. He was a detective on a show many, many years ago. And he had a similar experience where he met a dead person that was in the flesh. And obviously all the way back to the time of Jesus, certain saints and Jesus himself come back in physical form. So I guess it is possible, but it's not something you hear about every day. It's a story I'll never forget. And I just can't imagine what he must have went through that night, laying in bed with someone he knew was dead on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and yet was there with him. So that's my story for today. I've got others like this, obviously, and the book is full of short little stories like this that are all true. They're short because they're true. If they were fiction, I'd be building characters and I'd be putting in all kinds of scary stuff in that. But the fact of the matter is, that's how it was told to me. That's how I'm telling it to you. So, again, if you find this stuff interesting at all, subscribe, give me a thumbs up. Email me at storiesbesttoldinthedark@gmail.com with any stories you may have. And maybe we can chat about it, and I'll put one of your stories on here as well. So since it's October and it's Halloween time, I've got a couple of little tours coming up of some haunted cemeteries. I'm also going to visit the witch Bathsheba's burial site, which a friend of mine managed to find in the middle of the woods in Harrisville, Rhode Island. I'm not sure if anyone's supposed to know where she's buried, but I'm going to go there. And I've also got a paranormal conference I'm attending with Ed and Lorraine Warren's son-in-law the end of this month as well. So it's going to be a kind of a ghoulish, creepy holiday season. So again, wish everybody a good day, and I'll be back with some more stories very shortly. Thank you. Have a good day.